Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Talent Gap Fireside Chat, where we talk about causes of and solutions to the talent gap. I'm your host, Pete Strauss, and joining me today is Derek Snedden. He is an application security engineer at Deseret Digital Media. Welcome, Derek.
Yeah, hi. So I'm Derek Snedden. As you mentioned, I'm an application security engineer. I'm also an ethical hacking adjunct professor for Utah Tech University in Southern Utah.
Very cool. I'd certainly love to learn a little bit more about you and how you came to this place in your career. Often on the podcast, we talk to hiring managers about how we can open up more entry-level jobs. And, as somebody who just got into the world of security professionally, I'd be curious to hear how you did it. So could you give us a little bit of your journey?
Yeah, so it kind of started, I was in my junior year of college at Utah Tech University, the place I teach now. And I was in computer science. And I realized I did some software engineering stints. I did some gigs doing that, web development, the works. And I was like, I don't like this. I like tech, but I'm not a huge fan of software development. And I'm going nowhere fast. I was like, if I don't find something I'm passionate about, then I'm not going to make it, right? I'm not going to be able to have a job, hold it down, be excited about what I'm doing for work. And I was watching South Park, of all things, that very R-rated show, and it shows one of the characters hacking into the Pentagon with totally unrealistic. It was a combination of phone phreaking and denial of service to shut the Pentagon down. And some sort of light bulb clicked in my head. I'm like, okay, you know what? Hacking is such a mystical idea. At the time it was. I was like, I want to see if I could do it. And so I started Googling, and it was like top websites to learn hacking. I'm in my junior year, right? And I come across Hack the Box and then try Hack Me. And then I'm like, all right, I'm doing it. And so on top of my already very rigorous curriculum, I start packing that in. And get down the line. And this was right at the start of when I was dating my now wife. And right at the start of that. And she knew that I had just left a job I didn't like. And she just completely 100% supported me. She was like, hey, you want to do hacking? Why not? You go do it. So I committed to that. And we entered a long distance relationship because she lived in Japan, or she was going to live in Japan, study abroad. And I realized after about 6 months of dating her that I was like, I love this woman. I'm going to go propose to her. But I'm broke. I'm really broke. I'm a poor college student, right? I'm eating ramen every day, three times a day, sometimes 2 times a day. And that's my diet, right? I don't have tickets to go to Japan or the money to buy a wedding ring. And she doesn't know about any of this. And so I go and I was like, well, I like hacking. I've done 6 months worth of try Hack Me, Hack the Box. I don't know what I'm doing. And I just started putting my name out there. I'm like, hey, offering cybersecurity services to anyone who would bite. And doing anything from bug bounties to helping people feel safer online, helping secure their household, anything I could do. And eventually I raised the money, got some tickets to Japan, surprised my girlfriend at the time. Later down the week, I proposed to her in Kyoto. And then a year after that, to the day, we got married. Now, during that time, I also got an internship as a SOC analyst. And then that was how I got my first real job in cybersecurity. And they taught me so much good stuff there. They were incredible. And I was exiting my computer science degree, and I built a CTF competition for the club, and I led the club there. And a couple different things happened. After I had graduated, after I was just about to finish my internship, I attended a CTF conference that basically changed my life. I got second in it, and I got approached and basically asked, do you want a job? And I was like, yes, of course I do. I'm really hunting. I've applied over 300 different places. You know, I've been continually showing up to meetings and competitions and competing and putting my name out there. Yes, I want a job. And that's kind of how I got a job doing the red teaming side of application security engineering. And that was absolutely wonderful. And that's kind of a long and short of how I got to where I am today.
That's great, and a great story too about your wife. So I'm kind of curious, what did you do that did not work versus what did you do that did work? Because I think
Everything.
a lot of folks are well, because I think a lot of folks are doing a lot of searching and trying a lot of different things and applying to a ton of roles, and they're just not getting much traction. So what did you do that didn't and did work?
Yeah. So obviously I glossed over a lot of details. I didn't just magically show up to a CFTF competition and then butterflies and a unicorn and a rainbow came out and I got a job, right? That didn't happen that way. So I got incredibly lucky with the internship. I applied like 6 months before I got the job and I completely thought I was rejected. And then they came back to me and then they gave that to me. And that got me a little bit of a foot in the door because I got to connect with some really wonderful people. And then those people really helped me figure out what I was doing. But in the meantime of that, the number one mistake I was making was I was applying to everything that had easy apply on LinkedIn. That was the number one mistake I was making. I was getting some interviews. I did get some offers. A lot of them were pretty bad. But the number one thing is I was operating in such a broad stroke. And it's funny that I got into red team because I wasn't even applying for red team, even though that's what I wanted to do. I was pretty convinced I couldn't do red team. I told myself, by the time you're 30, you'll be in red team. I'm 23 now. So yeah, the things that didn't work, to answer your question, nail that down, is that I was applying on such a broad spectrum. And that's what a lot of people do, is they'll be like, oh, I'm going to apply for 5 job applications a day. Well, that's wonderful and great. And you should do that with some caveats. If you're only sending one resume out, and that's it, it's not personalized, you're going to get filtered out by whatever filters the HR department has in place. And that was an important lesson a good friend of mine over at Arctic Wolf taught me. He sat me down and he was like, hey, let me take a look at your resume. And he was like, this is trash. And I'm like, fair enough. You know, such a great guy. And then he was like, here's how you do this. And he taught me how to personalize them. And then that's when I started getting successes. And the other thing that I was doing wrong for a while was I was only doing security from my house. You need to get out there. Does that help answer your question?
Yeah, no, that's great. I'm curious what specifically you're customizing. Was it in like the application that you were doing, or was it in the actual resume that you were customizing things?
A little bit of both, but primarily the resume. So there's a great website called JobScan. And basically what you do is you take a description of the job and you figure out what keywords they're looking for, right? That's what their filters are probably going to be. I'm doing a best guess here, right? As a hacker, you just trial and error. It's guessing 90% of the time. You figure out what keywords they're probably filtering by. They're trying to match their job description to the resume. And then you fill your resume or your CV or whatever else you're using to apply with those keywords. Now, the great thing is that if they're going to use AI to filter job seekers out, then we could use AI to get us in as well. And so that was a thing I did. When I say use AI, got to be careful with that. Make sure you tune it. But I used that job scan to pick apart which keywords they were focusing on, tailored my resume to use those keywords, reapplied, and then it got to the point where if I did this method, I had about a 60% chance of getting a reply back in an interview, which in the job market, if you make 300 applications, then that's over 150 people getting back to you, right? That's great. That's what you want. That's what I mean by customization.
Gotcha. Yeah, 50% hit rate is crazy to me, especially when, in this market there's hundreds or thousands of people applying to each job. It's wild times for sure. I will say my experience as a recruiter is that there's not an ATS out there, an applicant tracking system that is able to auto reject people based on keywords. And I'm not sure how that myth got started. I can tell you I have seen some ATSs that can rank candidates based on keywords. So it'll scan their application or their resume, and it'll have a list of ranking. They're a 4-star match or a 5-star match. So some of them do have that functionality, but it's still at the end of the day the recruiter that needs to go through on the back end and approve or reject those applications or those records within the ATS, which is in most cases just kind of a glorified database. So my guess then is that you were getting responses based on recruiters that were looking for those keywords that matched the job that they were looking for,
Right.
looking to fill. So yeah, I mean, us recruiters, we certainly do function off of keywords. I know I do. I do a complex Boolean search string when I go out to the market and I find people on LinkedIn. So keywords are absolutely a part of my day to day, and I imagine they are for, say, the internal recruiters that are reviewing resumes as well. I think one challenge that a lot of companies have is that the internal recruiters or the HR folks, they don't necessarily have a grasp of what they're looking for because they're working on everything from the accounting assistant to the marketing manager to the CISO. And so, it's almost impossible for them to develop a specialty in reviewing security candidates and resumes. They just have too much stuff that they're working on, too many disparate skill sets. So, but what was your experience in working with the recruiters and the HR folks throughout these roles that you've managed to secure? Was it, largely positive, negative? What was your experience?
So I want to just clear some of the water here. So I was totally ignorant to that. I was completely guessing. So I like to call it a little bit of black box applying. So black box in penetration testing is the concept of you're attacking something without knowing how it works, or you don't have any knowledge of it. You just are given a name, right? And so I appreciate you filling me in on that. So my experience with HR and recruiters was actually pretty largely positive. When I got rejected, I worked really hard and I got rejected a lot. All right. I'm not going to sugarcoat that. I'm not some sort of magical unicorn that got every job ever. Right. When I got rejected, I worked really hard to make sure that I asked them. I was like, hey, why did I get rejected? Can you tell me what I can do better? I'm always wanting to improve. And I've got a lot to improve. All right. I know I'm a work in progress case. And they would give me some pointers, and they were really kind to do that. And I was like, wow, okay, thank you. This is actually incredibly helpful. And getting that practice interviewing was incredible. And some people might get really frustrated if you make it 2 or 3 rounds in interviews. And I had that happen a couple times where there was one case where I interviewed 5 times for a job and I was a finalist. And then it was that last one I didn't get. And I was like, what did I do wrong? What was I, And so I messaged the HR and they were like, hey, you were a terrific candidate. The only thing is this person just had an up on you. That's it. And I was like, oh, hey, no problem. And then they gave me some extra feedback. It was like, here's what you could do for your next job. Honestly, a lot of the HR and recruiter people, such as yourself, are honestly really friendly. You just got to talk to them. And I think the sheer amount of candidates that are coming in, I think there's a lot of people who are kind of dunking on recruiters when they shouldn't be. The sheer amount of candidates you guys have to pick from is probably enormous. So I can't blame you at all. I've had only good positive experiences with you guys.
Yeah, that's great to hear. I mean, really, in my experience, it's just a give and a take. Treat people how you want to be treated. With respect and responding to inquiries quickly and things like that. I mean, whatever you would appreciate as a candidate, the the recruiters are also going to appreciate as far as, professionalism and feedback and follow up and stuff like that. But yeah, I don't think a lot of people realize how much volume recruiters deal with. It's staggering. Like when I go out and I do a search, and I'm very specific when I look for somebody, I'm going through thousands of LinkedIn profiles a day. And those folks that are internal recruiters, they may post a job and they may get thousands of applications per job, and they have 10 jobs on their desk at any given time. So, inevitably, when you're working with that kind of volume, there's going to be some things that fall through the cracks. And I think on the candidate side, it's important to not only realize that, like you seem to have figured out, but to also know that you may need to get creative with with the way you reach out to folks, or the way you pursue these opportunities. What kind of volume, I guess, had you dealt with to the point where you actually got that first role? Like how many roles would you say that you had applied to at that point?
I could throw the ballpark number. I've applied for at least 300, but I guess if I were to start talking about where I really zeroed in, I probably sent about 100 applications that were customized. Like there, I took the time to really do that. And it was kind of towards that like last month or so, and my numbers could be way off. I'm just estimating here. It was towards that last month or so that I started really getting hits and I started figuring it out. But it wasn't online applying that got me my current role. It was being in person. And so I like to estimate that it's a bit of calculated luck. That's kind of a motto of mine, where you try and drive up how lucky you can be. I got lucky, but there was a reason for it, right? And I guess if I were to go and do this again, I would keep doing it customized. But the number one advice I have for people is you need to be involved with the security community, and they tend to help each other out. A lot of people look out for each other in this community, especially if you're known. And that was one of the things that was best for my job searching that I did, was I was constantly involved, constantly trying to get published on different things, constantly talking in different circles of the internet related to security. Discord servers were just like one of the best for me, is just getting involved and getting my name out there, and then becoming someone people could turn to when they're struggling on Hack the Box, right? And all of that kind of accumulated to, hey, people were coming to me and saying, hey, like, I have a job that you might be interested in. You should apply. And then taking that opportunity. So getting to your question here, there were so many things outside of just applying for jobs I did that contributed to me getting a role, especially fresh out of college.
Yeah, and you don't necessarily know which one of those tactics is going to pay off in your particular case. Like you said, it's definitely about putting yourself in the position to get lucky. That I think that's such an important point. A lot of folks from the outside would say, oh, he just got lucky. It's like, yeah, but he put himself in the position to get lucky over a period of time, so many different times, that on a long enough timeline, he was always going to get lucky, and there's actually an old saying in pool and billiards that I'm a huge fan of. It's the better I play, the luckier I get. And it's absolutely true, and applies to, I think, so many different areas of life. If you're doing the right things, if you're putting in the effort, you just have to know on a long enough timeline, you're going to get what you're after. You're going to get to your goal. And I think a lot of folks quit before they realize the potential and get into that role that they want. It could have been that opportunity, their dream job is just over the next horizon, and they just didn't stick with it long enough. Then again, I definitely feel for a lot of folks. I think there's a lot of people struggling financially these days that just need a job to pay the bills, and maybe they've been looking for their first break in security, for months at this point. What are your thoughts on, I kind of go on my rants about this sometimes, but the certification companies, the degree programs, the boot camps, there's a lot of these organizations cranking out candidates with these credentials, but there's not always the jobs in which for them to land. Have you noticed that phenomenon at all?
Oh yeah. Full disclosure, I really only have a Sec Plus. I guess I've got some like other certs and stuff like that. I have a Sec Plus and a degree in computer science, right? And I'm not some people interpret getting certs like getting Pokemon gym badges. And I don't think that's the play. So I hesitate to talk about this one. I'm willing to, but it gets a little controversial, right? A lot of people who get the CISSP, which is a difficult cert, are very, very proud of it. And that's awesome and super cool. And I think it's a struggle for recruiters to figure out which ones to allow, because a lot of them don't know the industry. They haven't been hacking all day like I have or like other people have, right? They don't know which certs actually show the skill and which ones are just multiple choice exams that you just take. Certs are unfortunately kind of a gatekeep in a lot of ways, but it's also a slightly imaginary gatekeep where there are other ways to be considered without getting certain certs. And that primarily comes in when you can show your abilities directly, such as a CTF competition or a portfolio. That's one of the things I've encouraged my students for. I would much rather, like when I talk to my students about getting work, I advise them that certs are cool and good, but they're expensive. And with like the CEH, $1,000, OSCP, $1,500, there was a $100,000 certification I was reading about, and the prices are enormous. But yet at the same time, in a lot of cases, they only prove that you can memorize information. They don't prove that you can sit down at a terminal and figure things out when they get rough. So there are certifications out there that I think are really, really, really good that are completely unrecognized. One of them is the CBBH, the Certified Bug Bounty Hunter, and one of them is the CPTS, Certified Penetration Testing Specialist, provided by Hack the Box. Their certification exam is 7 days long, 7 and 10 days respectively, and you have to complete a full penetration test. I'm going for the CPTS right now, but I like them because they're about as practical as you can get. They require a report to be delivered. I know TCM Security does this as well. It's just a shame that HR and recruiters don't really know about these ones because there's not very many certification holders. And I think there's a monopoly by the folks at CompTIA or why am I forgetting all the other ones? SANS Institute or those other guys.
Squared, yeah.
Yeah, who charge so much, but the exams I just talked about, they're literally $210 for 2 attempts. Now they're difficult exams and they prove your worth, but they're just not well recognized. That's my opinion on the certification thing is not great. I'm not a huge fan of them, at least most of them, because I don't think they prove a lot.
Yeah, it's interesting too. Most hiring managers I've talked to feel the same exact way. It's show me what you can do, or show me your communication skills. That's what I care about versus the acronyms. Yet what's on the job description tends to be acronyms. It tends to be the certifications or degrees. And like you said, I think a lot of this is just uninformed HR, or in some cases, HR that may be informed, but they have certain policies or requirements that require them to include certain things. But that's why I always tell hiring managers, like, look, make sure that you're reviewing this job description before it goes live and goes out to the market and people start applying to it. Because if you have that CISSP that requires 5 years of experience on your entry level job posting, some people will see that, just not even apply. Well, they'll say that's ridiculous. That doesn't make any sense. So, yeah, on the hiring side, super crucial to get these things right. And as a job seeker yourself, it seems like your experience and your preferences align with that of hiring managers, but there's still something in the way of getting you guys to find each other, which, I find interesting. But yeah, like you said, that the practical aspect of these certs is so important. The hiring managers care more about what you do, and in some cases, it's more about who you know. It's not even about the certification, or in some cases, even the skills as much. It could be communication skills. Most folks I talk to on the podcast as hiring managers, they care more about communication skills, soft skills, quote unquote, than really anything else. Do you think your communication skills contributed to your being hired at all?
Oh my gosh. I'm not going to sit here and be like, yeah, my communication skills are so great. So my mother, when I told my mom that I was going to be interviewing on a podcast, she got so excited. My mother is like one of the main reasons I'm here today. She was a communications professor at university. And so I grew up really listening to her talk all about that stuff, right? And I learned a lot from that. I still am trying every day to get a lot better at it. But the number one thing I found was you need to make sure that you're being positive. As frustrating as this is, I see some people, I think in good faith, posting on LinkedIn, for example, is like their frustrations on getting a job, which is totally valid, right? Been there, done that, totally valid. But they'll oftentimes target the recruiter or the HR manager who's doing the hiring. And even if those people are at fault, it looks really bad on you, right? And so I try to really make sure that I have something good to say about everyone as much as I can. I know that's not always easy, but I think everyone has something they can be complimented on, right? And I try to apply the principle of talking good behind people's backs. So that way, there's a concept of basically projection. I'm getting it way wrong. Where if you are talking good behind people's backs, people will associate that good with you. And likewise, if you're talking bad about people's backs, if you're going around saying, yeah, Becky's such a nuisance and Jonathan can't get anything done, people will associate those traits with you. And I really think that even if you're looking at what communication skills you have and you're wanting to assess whether or not you're ready for the job market, I would like to challenge anyone who's listening to this. And of course, I have talked bad, unfortunately, behind people's backs. I really regret it. And I've had to learn. But I would like to challenge internally, how positive of a person are you? How much good are you throwing into the world when you talk? Because I really believe that, given my experience with so many different people coming to help me when they saw that I needed a job and I was getting married and I was stressed, so many people came back to me. And I think part of that was because I really worked hard to try and be as kind as I could to anyone I could. I'm not perfect at it, but I think that's such an important principle. And of course, moving forward, working on your communication skills, public speaking is all important. It all kind of wraps around and plays a bit. I know I'm rambling here a little bit, but my number one takeaway is be as positive while being genuine as you can. And it will really help with your job prospects.
I completely agree. And it's what I tell a lot of folks that I talk to on my career guidance chats. I'll tell somebody if I see their LinkedIn post and they tend to be pretty negative, I'll let them know, hey, you realize this is like your entire persona that's
Yep.
coming through to would-be hiring managers, recruiters, whomever. Anybody that can view any of your LinkedIn posts can see all of them. It's not like they can't just go to your profile and see everything you've ever commented or posted on. it really cannot be understated, the importance of being positive on LinkedIn. And I think sometimes the tendency is, if you're starting to get frustrated, you end up finding other people that are frustrated, and you fall into this negative echo chamber. But you have to be cognizant of that, and find some sort of way to break yourself out of that, because once you're stuck in it, it can be so hard to find anything positive, because everything you see on LinkedIn is negative all the time. It's extremely difficult. So yeah, it's great that you were aware of that, and applied that I guess strategy to your search. And yeah, that's great to hear. Any other factors you could think of that maybe have contributed to your success in job seeking?
So, like I said, getting involved is absolutely critical. I don't think you can. I think you can maybe make it into blue teaming. Blue teaming is a bit easier to make it into than red, and blue teaming is super awesome. I had a wonderful experience doing that. But I don't think you can make it into red teaming if you're not involved and passionate. Period. I think you can get by in compliance with blue if you're just like not move up at all. Due to it's a little bit easier to get into, but definitely not red. I really think you need to be involved. You need to be going to the conventions. You need to be chatting in the Discord rooms. You need to be hanging out with people and playing King of the Hill. I love King of the Hill so much. It's so fun. It's, for those who don't know, it's basically where you get one machine and you have like 10 people you're playing with, and your goal is to root the machine, so completely hijack it, and then patch it to where other people can't get in and take it from you. It's a great time. You want to connect with those people, and because you never know, your buddy might get a job, and then there might be an opening, and your buddy is referring you in, right? You want to build those relationships and remaining positive. Just reiterating everything over I said, that was my main strategy. I will say that I don't think in the world of hacking, there isn't like a surefire way to hack it, get a job in 2 days. It's consistently being involved and being positive and working hard at your skills that gets you the job. And unfortunately, as much as I hate to say this, if you're not doing those things, you'll struggle to get work. And that's just something, as a person, you have to reassess yourself and be as honest as you can to say whether or not, am I actually doing everything I should be to make it? Is there something I can improve? And then asking other people to help you, because I'm sure, myself included, I would be delighted to help as many people as I can. I would really love to try. That's what I try to do with my students. I'm sure a lot of security professionals can really empathize with the job search, and they would be delighted to help you out if you just ask. The question is, are you asking?
Yeah, for sure. And there's so many places, you kind of mentioned this earlier, there's so many places online that you can find mentors. I'm thinking of all the Discord channels I'm on that have a mentor and a mentee section specifically for exactly that reason. Any specific recommendations, I guess, from your end of places to go online to network with other like-minded security folks?
So that's a really good question. Honestly, one of the best ones I've had was just a bunch of guys I met, and they were like, yeah, I want to get into hacking. I like hacking. It's fun, right? And they do a variety of different things. And then we just hung out and we started doing it. And then you're learning from each other. And then a lot of the cases, it's been where one of them gets a job and they start referring the others, right? And the reason I say that is because you're building those personal connections. Now, another great place to do it is, I love the Hack the Box community a lot. They are very, very hardworking people. They are very much no bull crap kind of people. And the thing I would advise is, you don't just go in, everyone's at a different level in security. You don't just go in and say, all right, I'm just only going to get help. make sure you give it to. So there might be someone who's just struggling to start Burp Suite, a relatively basic component. It's a tool used for web proxying. They might be struggling to just start it, right? And Burp Suite. Let's say you're good at that, right? You go and send them a message, right? And that usually when you do that enough, things start reciprocating and you start making friends. And then that friend that you helped set up Burp Suite that one time suddenly is a master at parameterized queries or logic bugs or who knows what else. And you have a friend you can ask. And most of the time, so long as they're not too busy, they'll be happy to help you. By participating in those communities, you start getting a little bit more recognized. The end of the day, you should be hacking. If you want to get in security, you should be hacking or setting up labs and stuff and involving other people when you do that, and then being willing to help other people as they go on that journey, no matter how low in skill you might perceive yourself to be. I know you asked which communities. TCM is great. Hack the Box is great. Try Hack Me is great. Even just going onto the Discord server search and typing in hacking is great. Obviously, don't do any illegal hacking. There is some of that out there. Don't do that. But getting involved that way is how you do it.
Yeah, that's great. And it sounds like your strategy, whether you thought about it or not, was essentially just meet as many people as you can, have positive interactions with those folks. And you're basically building up good karma every step of the way. Just having positive interactions with people, helping people however you can, even if it's something you're not an expert at. But I think a lot of folks, they don't realize how much they can help somebody. You have some level of experience in some area that somebody else does not. There's always some way that you can contribute, even if you're more familiar with a certain industry than somebody else, even if you don't have the specific security experience in that industry. If you know the industry, that's some sort of knowledge you can share with somebody. Going back to your point from earlier, it's interesting you mentioned that the blue team might be a little bit easier to break into, and I have my own theories about, I think, why pen testing, red teaming is tougher to break into versus blue team, but kind of curious your thoughts on that. Why you think that sub-discipline of security might be easier to break into than pen testing.
And don't get me wrong, that is not me saying that it is less disciplined or less important or any of those things, right? I'm married to one. I love my blue teaming folks. They are incredibly intelligent, incredibly hardworking, and incredibly good at what they do. So the thing is with red teaming is it's kind of like the Hollywood of security, right? We're the guys who were tailgating people into the building. We are calling them up and pretending to be tech support when we're not, right? We are breaking into systems. We are assessing bugs. We're documenting all of them. It's exciting and it's showy, right? I've always had the fantasy ever since I was a little kid, of breaking into a bank. Now, legally, of course, right? Of course. I'm not going to, especially on your podcast, I'm not going to admit to being a bank robber. I'm not. But pen testing is a way you can become a theoretical legal bank robber. There's a lot of shine to it. Now, I'm going to say that creates competition. And the people who are wanting pen testing positions are really good at what they do. They're incredible. There are so many people I meet where I'm like, oh my gosh, you've been doing this since you were 2. Like, I'm so done. It's crazy. With blue teaming is a wonderful experience. I had a wonderful time doing it. It just initially seems a little less flashy. And I don't think it's like people trying to get into game development versus web development. Game development tends to, everyone likes video games. Everyone wants to make their own, right? Not everyone is as enthusiastic about building a website. But I will say, for my blue teaming folks, defending attacks as they happen is some of the coolest experiences you can have. are some of the coolest experiences you can have. And if you're looking for a red teaming position, don't ignore the blue teaming, because you may find you really like it, and that experience really helps you get into red. So I do think there's a lot more competition in red, to answer your question. I don't think any less of blue, though.
Yeah, that was going to be my answer as well. It's really just the level of competition because of the sexiness, quote unquote, of the red team side. And to that point, blue team, I would say less sexy, still, great career path. And I suppose another sort of side door, you look at getting into the industry, I would say pen testing is kind of like the front door. That's where everybody wants to go, but it's probably the least likely to happen. Blue team, maybe one step below that in terms of accessibility, or one step above it, easier to access, or less competition. And then there's GRC, which is even further in the other direction.
Yep.
A lot less folks looking to get into GRC, but I would even argue greater chance of breaking into the GRC side of the industry. And I've seen so many folks pivot from GRC into some of the more technical disciplines. I think it kind of takes a strategy, it takes a plan, and it's hard to just kind of fall from GRC into something more technical, but it can be done. And it kind of makes me think of sort of the hacker ethos and always looking for another way in, thinking about the side doors, the windows, all the other types of things to get you to where you want to be. Any concepts that you could apply from red teaming or pen testing in job seeking? Like I'm thinking of social engineering concepts. Like, is there any way that you could use those to social engineer your way into a job or a career?
So if I get too off the rails, I'm going to talk about this forever, because I am so passionate about penetration testing. It's like insane. And so I love every part of it. And I love talking about every part of it, including social engineering. And social engineering is it's kind of interesting. I teach my students, I'll open with this. I teach my students that the number one thing you need to do with social engineering is make sure you're ethical the entire time you're doing it. Because, if you're not, then people are going to catch on to that, right? I think that's pretty normal. So there's like six principles of social engineering. And I highly recommend you do not use the intimidation principle unless you absolutely have to when you're on the job, but definitely not in job seeking, where that would be potentially illegal because you don't have authorization to do so. The main social engineering principle I would typically use when I'm talking about job seeking would be social proof. That I've kind of iterated on that a lot. We can connect the dots of everything I've said to talk about social proof. But the idea that other people think you're cool, and so enough people think you're cool that people trust you, right? That is the number one. I would very much caution people not to use any of the manipulation tactics you learn from social engineering when interacting with job seekers. The reason for that is, as fun as they are to use, unless you're in an ethical setting, they're unethical, such as in the wild, right? Don't use scarcity and urgency to manipulate a recruiter. That can't be fun for them, man, where they're having to really be nervous about getting a candidate or something. A social proof is the least problematic one. That is the primary tool I use, is working hard to build your reputation as someone who is not only good at their craft, which I'm always improving, I can always get better, but someone who is kind and is easy to work with and is friendly and wants to work with you. I'm just going to speak from some experience that I would far rather take a friendly coworker who doesn't know a lot over the opposite, a difficult coworker who knows everything. I understand there's use cases for the difficult coworker, but it's ultimately, I can teach someone the technical skills. I have a much harder time teaching them the social. But if they build that social proof and they use that, they can show that they have those social skills. And then if I were to, let's say, I'm just guessing here, I'm not a hiring manager like you, I'm not an expert in that field. If I was wanting to have a junior pen tester come onto my team and work with me, well, I'd want them to be known as being a nice guy, right? I want them to be known as being a good person who takes feedback really well. I can teach them the rest of it. That's my thoughts on using social engineering and red teaming tactics to get jobs. Is just use social proof. It's really effective.
No, that's great. I think that sums it up really well. It reminds me of, when I try to find new clients, a lot of it is based on social proof. I think because there's a sense of trust there. And I think especially security people tend to be very wary. And so trust in by association, security through trust is everything for security practitioners. And if you're able to leverage that trust through social connections, that's going to improve your chances as a job seeker, as a recruiter, as anybody. In booking guests for this podcast, so much of it is about trust and social proof. Hey, I spoke to Pete. He really knows what he's talking about. I think he'd be a great guest for his podcast. That social proof really does make a difference, and especially for junior folks. And I think a lot of junior folks don't realize that they can leverage the power of social proof so early on in their career. It can be a differentiator. And when the market is so crowded with so many people trying to break into the industry, you have to be doing something that your competition, is not really to succeed. What about the level of competition that we have in the industry right now for some of these select few entry level or junior security jobs? Any thoughts as to how, I don't know, we can remedy this situation or open up more entry level security jobs?
Well, unfortunately, I have to take a bit of a backseat on this one. I don't know everything. I'm not an expert in every single field, and I'm not entirely sure how we do it. I can definitely pinpoint some things that I think are symptoms, but I don't think will quell the disease itself. So for an example of a symptom is the monopoly we have on certifications and how much influence they have on recruiters who are honestly just good people trying to do their job. I really think we need to dispel the myth that recruiters are evil people, because I see that all the time, right? I do think there is a monopoly hold on some of the certifications, because when I meet some of the people who are absolutely in charge of security, oftentimes they were like, yeah, they just gave me the job and I figured it out, right? And then they've got one certification, and it's like, certifications weren't for me. I had the experience. And I was like, okay, then what changed? Like, why are they needed now, right? I think maybe that's kind of that goalpost problem, right? Is when I see I saw an entry level CISSP job for $40K a year, which is a joke. And I don't think they quite knew what that job description really was asking for, right? I think that's part of the problem. I also think the other part of the problem is, as with any competition, I do a lot of track running and stuff like that. As with any competition, I can pretty much guarantee that a lot of people are looking for the quick hack to get in, and they're not looking at you said this word earlier, so I'm okay saying it now, the not sexy way of doing it, which is just hacking. It's just, or in the case of track, just showing up to run, right? Just showing up to do the craft. I can guarantee you that a lot of the people probably aren't. They might say in their bio that they're an ethical hacker, and that's cool and great. But when they get on TryHackMe, they just do one question and log off, and that's it. That's their experience, right? So I'm pretty confident that if you do put in the time and you do put in the work, you could start giving yourself lots of luck by being a better player in the space. and you can outcompete a lot of different people, especially in entry level. Does that help answer your question?
Yeah, no, that's great. I mean, you're committing to doing the thing and doing a lot of the thing versus doing the thing once and saying that's good enough. It's about, iterating and, like you said, putting yourself in the position to get lucky. And that's a lot of time, a lot of effort. So there's no shortcut, I guess, is the short answer. And I always say that about recruiting as well, and building talent. Like, there's no shortcut to gaining experience. Like, you just have to have some time in seat to be able to absorb knowledge and learn. There's really no substitute for that. So that's a great point. Well, we're actually coming up on time. It's been a very interesting and I think enlightening for our job seeking viewers conversation. But just one last question for you, Derek. Is there anything that we're not talking about in the industry, but we should be, especially as it relates to hiring?
I think one of the things we need to talk about, just like lay it out there, is burnout. This is a tough industry. I can't sugarcoat it. I have cried so many times looking at a box on like Hack the Box or Try Hack Me. I'm like, bro, why isn't it working? And like I get tired and I lose a lot of sleep, and then like I'm depressed for the rest of the day, right? And it's like, we need to address, I'm sure a lot of security folks can relate to that, right? Or they're thinking that I'm seeing all these goalposts moving and I'm never good enough, And I know I've said it where I've said like, well, you need to be working really hard. You need to be doing X, Y, and Z. But I'm also going to say that this is something, again, my mother, absolutely love that lady. She has told me a lot where she was like, okay, are you taking breaks? Like, are you breathing? Right. And those are such important things. And so when you're job seeking and everything is not working right now, because, that's what happens, right? You fail a lot. Make sure you take a break. Okay. Because you're going to think a lot clearer if you take a second to rest. And I think a lot of security folks are really, really guilty of not doing that. So that's just a casual reminder that what you're doing is really, really tough and really, really hard. And take care of yourself. There will always be more boxes to hack. Make sure you take care of yourself first so you can hack later. Okay. That's all I want to say.
No, that's great. And it's actually a topic that's come up relatively frequently lately on the podcast from folks in DFIR to CISOs. I think there is a lot of burnout right now. And you highlight a great point there to just go outside, touch grass, take a break. And to go back from our conversation from earlier about how you can get into this negative sort of echo chamber, especially for job seekers out there. I think the best way to remedy that is just step away, get off of social media, go get out in the sun and just forget about it for a while. Do something to clear your head so you can come back to things refreshed. So that's an excellent place to end and a great point, Derek. If people want to reach out to you and reach out to you professionally, what's the best way to do so?
My LinkedIn's great. I'm sure you'll post a link to it, and feel free to message me, connect to me. I'm always happy to chime in any way I can. And of course, there's so much for me to learn as well. So if you have any feedback, this goes for anyone, to share with me on what I can be doing better. I'm always welcome to that as well. Always looking for improvement and always happy to help other people on their journey.
Awesome. Well, thanks for your time, Derek. And thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
Hello, everyone, and thanks for tuning in to this episode of the Talent Gap Fireside Chat. Don't forget to follow our page on LinkedIn and like and subscribe on Spotify and YouTube. Hit that notification bell to be notified when we drop a new episode. New episodes air every Friday at 4 p.m. Eastern.